The lights in my office were on. That was the first thing I noticed, and it stopped me cold, right there in the parking lot, car keys still in my hand. The November air cutting through my coat, like it always does in Halifax in late autumn. It was 7:30 in the morning. The cleaning crew didn't come until 8. I was always the first one in. Always. 37 years of being the first one in. I stood there for a moment, just looking up at the second floor windows of Whitcroft Catering. The company I'd built from a rented church kitchen and a borrowed van into one of the most respected event catering operations in Atlantic Canada. We had 3 contracts with the provincial government. We catered the Lieutenant Governor's dinner 4 years running. In 4 days, we would host our own 35th anniversary gala right here in this building for 200 guests. And someone was already inside. I started toward the front entrance, the glass doors that faced the street, the ones with our logo etched on them, the ones I'd paid for with money I didn't quite have back in 2003 and never once regretted. I was maybe 10 feet from the door when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick ones. Mrs. Whitcroft. I turned. It was the man from the HVAC company. He'd been here all week servicing the industrial kitchen ventilation before the gala. A quiet fellow, early 50s, work jacket, always had a thermos. He'd been nothing but professional for 4 days, and I hadn't thought much about him one way or another. He was looking at the building. Not at me. At the building. "Don't use the front," he said quietly. "Go around the back, the loading bay. Please." I stared at him. "I beg your pardon?" He finally looked at me. His expression was careful, measured, like a man choosing every word. "I was here at 6 to finish the ductwork on the 3rd floor unit," he said. "I came up the fire stairs. The door to your office level was open, the one that's supposed to stay locked after hours." He paused. "I heard 2 voices. I didn't mean to, but I heard them." I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite fear. Something older than fear. The feeling you get when the ground beneath you isn't quite where you left it. "Whose voices?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "I think you should hear it for yourself." I propped the stairwell door. "If you go around back and take the stairs up, the voices carry through the ventilation shaft near the 2nd landing. You'll hear clearly." I looked at him for a long moment. He was a stranger. He owed me nothing. He could have finished his work, packed his tools, and driven home without saying a single word. "Thank you," I said. I went around the back. The loading bay door was unlocked, which it shouldn't have been, not at that hour. I slipped inside, past the walk-in coolers and the stainless prep tables, past the rack of chafing dishes we'd use at the gala, and I found the fire stairs. The door at the bottom had a rubber wedge pushed under it. He'd kept his word. I climbed slowly. The stairs were metal and I stayed close to the wall, where the sound was smallest. At the 2nd landing there was a ventilation grate mounted low, near the floor. I crouched down. 2 voices. One I knew immediately. One I had to listen to for a few more seconds before I was certain. The first voice was my CFO's. His name is Wendell Hoare, and he has worked for me for 19 years. He joined us when we were still a mid-sized operation, helped us through the 2008 recession, through the pandemic disruptions, through 2 rounds of restructuring. I trusted him completely. I trusted him the way you trust the floor under your feet, not because you think about it, but because you've never once had reason not to. The second voice was my operations manager, a woman named Petra who'd been with the company 11 years. They were talking about a buyer, not in the abstract way that sometimes happens in business, a theoretical conversation, a what if. This was specific. There was a firm based in Toronto, a hospitality group that had been quietly acquiring regional catering and event companies across the country. They had a number, a specific number, and Wendell was describing a timeline. "The LOI goes to their legal team Monday morning," he said. "By the time she realizes what's happened, the non-compete will already be in the term sheet." I pressed my back against the wall and I just breathed. He said she, me. He was talking about me. "She'll fight it," Petra said. There was something in her voice I couldn't quite read. Reluctance, maybe. With what? The company books are in my name as signing officer. I've been reclassifying the assets for 8 months. On paper, she owns a shell. The real value has been shifted into the subsidiary I set up in February. February. I had signed documents in February. He'd brought them to me with a stack of other papers. End-of-year filings. A lease renewal for the Dartmouth warehouse. I'd signed. I'd trusted him. The gala was in 4 days. I stayed crouched at that grate for what felt like a long time, but was probably 2 minutes. Then I stood up and walked back down the stairs, through the loading bay, into the parking lot. My hands were completely steady. I don't know why. They just were. The HVAC man was at his van. He looked at me as I walked past, and I nodded once. "Thank you," I said again. "For telling me." He nodded back. He didn't ask any questions. Some people understand without being told that there are moments when the only thing you can give someone is information and then step out of the way. I sat in my car and I called my daughter. She was at my door in 40 minutes. She still had coffee from the drive-thru in her hand when she walked in. She'd stopped even though she was rushing, because that's the kind of person she is. She sets things down in her head and deals with them one at a time. I've always admired that about her. She got it from her father. My daughter is 34 years old. She's a chartered professional accountant. She has worked at various points for 2 of the large firms in Halifax, and she now does forensic accounting work. Which is to say, she spends her professional life finding exactly the kind of thing Wendell had been doing for the past 8 months. I told her everything. All of it. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she set down her coffee cup. "How much access does he still have?" she asked. "All of it. His credentials are current. He's in the building right now." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You cannot let him know you heard anything. Not a word, not a look, nothing. Can you do that?" I thought of 19 years, of the way he'd come to my mother's funeral, of the Christmas party where he'd given a toast about what Whitcroft Catering meant to this city. Of all the times I'd said, without a second thought, "I don't know what I'd do without Wendell." "Yes," I said. "I can do that. Good. I'm going to need the name of your corporate lawyer, and I'm going to need remote read-only access to the accounting system. Not Wendell's login, yours. Do you have your own credentials?" I did. I'd set up my own login years ago when the system was first installed, and I'd never had any reason to use it because Wendell always handled everything. He would have known that. He would have been counting on it. She opened her laptop. I gave her my login. "Go to work," she said. "Smile at him. Ask him about the gala preparations. Tell him the floral supplier called about the centerpieces. Anything normal. You're going to be here all day?" "I'm going to be here all night if I have to," she said. "Mom, I've got you." I stood up. I put on my coat. I went to work. Walking into that building and saying good morning to Wendell Hoare was one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life. He was at his desk when I came in. Dark suit, the blue tie I'd always liked. He looked up with that easy, professional smile, the same smile he'd given me for 19 years. And he said the gala preparations were looking excellent, and had I seen the updated seating chart? "Not yet," I said. "I'll look at it this afternoon." "Take your time," he said. "Everything's on track." I don't know how I kept my face neutral. I went to my office, closed the door, and stood at the window looking out at the harbor for a full minute before I trusted myself to sit down. My phone buzzed. My daughter. He set up a numbered company in February, registered in Ontario. Most of your equipment assets and the 2 government contracts have been reassigned to it on paper. He forged your signature on 3 transfer documents. 3 transfer documents. I tried to remember February. I'd had a cold. I'd been dealing with a difficult supplier situation and a staffing shortage at the same time. He'd brought me papers and I'd signed them. I'd trusted him. "I've sent everything to your lawyer," she wrote. "She says we need to move fast. Once the LOI goes to the Toronto firm Monday, it gets complicated. Can you get Wendell out of the building for a few hours tomorrow?" I sat there thinking. Then I texted back. "I'll tell him I need him at the Dartmouth warehouse to review the equipment for the Gala rental inventory. I do it every year before a big event. He won't question it. Perfect. That gives us the window we need. Also, who has signing authority on the corporate bank accounts besides Wendell? I thought for a moment. My son-in-law is listed as alternate signing officer. We added him 2 years ago when Wendell had knee surgery. There was a long pause. Your daughter has been in the dark about this too? Yes. I never thought to tell her the details. She's not involved in the business. Another pause. Mom, your son-in-law might be the most important person in this right now. I need to tell you something about my son-in-law because it matters. He is not who I expected my daughter to marry. That's not a criticism. It's just the truth. He's an electrician. He runs his own small contracting business. He's quiet in the way that some people mistake for simple, which is a mistake but an understandable one. When my daughter first brought him home, I was polite in the way you are when you're not entirely sure what to think. I had ideas about what her life would look like. He wasn't part of those ideas. Over the years, though, I've watched him. He shows up. That's the simplest way I can put it. When her grandmother was in palliative care, he drove 2 hours each way, twice a week, for 3 months, without being asked and without complaining. When my roof needed replacing and I was in the middle of a contract crisis, he and 2 of his crew came on a Saturday and did it at cost because he said he couldn't think about letting me deal with one more thing. He never talks about those things afterward. He just does them and moves on. I had never quite let myself admit that he was the best decision my daughter ever made. When they came to see me together that evening, my daughter had called him as soon as she understood the full picture. He sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and listened to everything without once checking his phone or interrupting or offering a solution before I'd finished talking. Then he said, "The alternate signing authority. When was the last time anyone checked whether it's still active in the bank records?" I didn't know, neither did my daughter. He pulled out his phone and called the bank's commercial accounts line. He sat on hold for 11 minutes. I watched him. He was completely calm. When he finally spoke to someone, he explained that he was an authorized officer on the account and needed to confirm the current signing authority structure. There was a pause on the other end, then another. Then he said, "I see. And when was that change processed?" He listened. His expression didn't change. He said thank you and hung up. He looked at me. "Wendell filed paperwork 6 weeks ago to remove me as alternate signing officer. The bank says it was processed because it came with what looked like a letter from the account holder." He paused. "From you. Another forged document. 6 weeks ago, while I'd been focused on Gala preparations, Wendell had quietly closed the last door that anyone else could use to access the accounts. Except it hadn't quite worked, because my daughter had been in the accounting system all day. And she had found something. The subsidiary he created," she said, opening her laptop. "He made one mistake. The email address he used to register it is a variation of his personal email, Wendell, whore, just with different numbers. He tried to make it look like a generic corporate address, but it traces back, and 3 of the transfer documents he had you sign. I've compared the signature to your signature on 15 other documents from the same period." She turned the screen toward me. "The letter spacing is inconsistent. The ink pressure is different. These were signed by the same hand, but it wasn't yours." I looked at my own signatures side by side. She was right. I would never have noticed on my own. But she was right. "Can a court see this?" I asked. "It's exactly what a court needs to see," she said. "Our lawyer says if we get this to her by 9 tomorrow morning, she can file for an injunction before the business day begins Monday. That freezes any asset transfers and blocks the LOI from going through." She paused. "But we need the original signed documents from the physical files in your office, not scans. The originals." I looked at the time. It was 9:40 in the evening. "The building locks at 10, I said. "Wendell has the evening code." "Do you?" my son-in-law asked. "I have the master override. I've just never used it." He stood up. "Then let's go. We went in through the back again. The loading bay, the prep kitchen, the fire stairs. I don't know why the back entrance kept feeling right. Maybe because Wendell had never thought much about the back of the building. He was a front door person. Everything visible, everything managed, everything controlled from the front. My son-in-law stayed downstairs while my daughter and I went to the filing room off my office. 37 years of records, 4 gray cabinets, and a fire-proof safe. I knew exactly where those February files would be because I'd put them there myself. I found the folder in 11 minutes. My daughter photographed every page with her phone before I put the folder inside a sealed envelope for the lawyer. We were back in the parking lot by 10:15. She sent the photographs that night. I drove the original documents to our lawyer's home address. She'd offered, once she understood the timeline. And I got back to my own house just before midnight. I slept 4 hours. It felt like enough. The next morning I called Wendell at 8 o'clock and asked him to drive out to the Dartmouth warehouse to walk through the rental inventory. He said, of course, no problem, he'd head over right away. Our lawyer filed the injunction at 9:17. The RCMP's Commercial Crime Unit received a referral from our lawyer's office at 10:40. At 2 in the afternoon, I was in my office when I heard voices in the hallway. Not raised, quiet and firm, I opened my door. 2 officers. Wendell very still in a way I'd never seen him before. His face was the color of old paper. He looked at me, just for a moment. I don't know what he expected to see. Shock, maybe. Confusion. The face of a womanson who still didn't understand what was happening. I looked back at him steadily and I said nothing. They walked him out the front, past the logo on the glass doors. I need to tell you what happened in the weeks and months after, because the story isn't really about Wendell. The injunction held. The Toronto firm withdrew their interest once the forged documents became part of a court record. No reputable acquirer wants to touch a deal that's under criminal investigation. The subsidiary Wendell had created was dissolved by court order. The assets he had reassigned on paper were restored. The government contracts remained ours. He was charged with fraud over $5,000, breach of fiduciary duty, and forgery. His lawyer entered a not guilty plea. The case is still before the courts, and I'll leave it there. What I want to tell you about is the Gala. We held it 4 days later, exactly as planned, for 200 guests in our own building. I stood at the front of the room in the same dress I'd bought 3 months earlier for the occasion. And I gave the same speech I'd been writing in my head for years, about what it means to build something, about the people who help you build it, about the things that are worth protecting. I did not mention what had happened that week. This wasn't the right room for it. But I looked out at the faces in that room, and I saw my daughter, who had sat in my kitchen on a Tuesday night and said, "I've got you." And I had believed her. And I saw my son-in-law, who had spent 11 minutes on hold with a bank and then driven across the city at 10 o'clock at night without ever once making it feel like a favor. And I saw our catering staff, who had prepared a meal for 200 people, while their company was fighting for its life and didn't even know it. After the speeches, after the meal, after the room had begun to empty and the staff were clearing tables, my son-in-law found me near the bar. He had a glass of sparkling water because he never drinks at events. He was driving, he said, as he always says. He looked around the room. "Good party," he said. "Good party," I agreed. We stood there for a moment in comfortable silence. "I owe you an apology," I said, "not for anything specific. Just, for a long time I didn't see you clearly. I see you now." He didn't make a big thing of it. He just nodded once, the way he does, and said, "Family." That was it, just the one word, and somehow it was exactly right. 37 years ago, I rented a kitchen in a church basement in North End, Halifax, and I made sandwiches for a union meeting because someone canceled on them last minute, and I needed the money. The minister let me use his commercial refrigerator and his phone, and I paid him back with a tray of squares and a handshake and a promise to donate the catering for the church's centennial dinner, which I did 3 years later, once I could afford to. That's how Whitcroft Catering started. It didn't survive because of me. It survived because of the people who showed up. The ones who stayed late. The ones who drove to Dartmouth at night. The ones who sat on hold and didn't complain. The ones who said, "I've got you," and meant it. Wendell thought he could take it because he thought I was alone at the center of it. He thought the company was me, and that if he hollowed out the paperwork carefully enough, I'd be left with nothing but a name. He was wrong about what I was standing on. I still come in first every morning. The lights in my office are off until I get there, and I'm the one who turns them on. Some habits are worth keeping. But I don't walk from the parking lot to the front door alone anymore. Not because I'm afraid, but because there are usually people arriving at the same time now, and we walk in together. That seems like the right way to do it. If you've ever built something and worried about who might be quietly working against you from the inside, I want you to know that the answer isn't to trust no one. The answer is to look more carefully at who's already standing beside you. The people you've been taking for granted, the quiet ones, the ones who just show up. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone in your life who turned out to be something completely different than you thought? Were they worse than you expected or better? I'd really like to know.